We are going to follow the money.
Everything you need to know can be understood with this simple phrase: follow the money. And believe me, that's what's happened.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Welcome to College Sports Follow the Money, an all-new podcast diving into the critical issues surrounding the big business of college sports. I'm Andrew Monaco, joined by former president of Texas A&M University and former chancellor at the University of Missouri, Dr. Bowen Loftin, and former vice president and general manager of Fox Sports Southwest, Jon Heidtke. From NIL to the transfer portal and opt-outs, to the college football playoff, conference realignment, and more, we tackle the key issues facing college athletics today and into the future.
I need to feel you, Jerry! Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money! Show me the money! You're the loudest black man!
We welcome you to another edition, College Sports Follow the Money. We're going to follow a lot of it. Here we go. I know we haven't been together very recently, and we will change that in the future. But with Dr. Loftin and Jon Heidtke, I'm Andrew Monaco. We're so glad that you are here. And let's see, should we follow the money in a contract? Should we follow the money about what might be coming in with an expanded playoff? Can we follow the money that may be on a jersey? Can we follow the money that may follow a coach who was just fired? This is where we're going on this episode and more. Wonderful to see both of you. How are you?
I'm fine, Andrew. You're the man in demand. I'll tell you, this is your part of the year when it's awful hard to get a piece of the action, because Andrew is one of everybody. You are loved, my friend.
I am just following the money. Jon knows that.
That's what you get. We understand.
This is the time of year you want to be paid by event.
You know me too well, my friend. Way too well.
But I object to one thing. I object to you and Jon being moved up out of my sight line. I can't see you that well anymore.
I don't get to see Dr. Loftin every game. Yeah, that bothers me. I don't get to see him every game.
And I always stopped by your table there and said howdy as well. Come on.
That's right. That's right.
It's a long climb up where you are now.
It is. I get about halfway and then I realize it's a longer climb than I thought. Dr. Loftin, let's start with you. And we knew that Mike Elko was extended with Texas A&M, and now we know a little bit of the details. And there's a little bit of selflessness in here. This isn't all just the money going to Coach Elko. One of the things here is he wants to make sure that he makes, this makes a lot of sense, and an opportunity for his assistant coaches, because we know if you're going to bring them on, you have to spend the money for a good staff. You have to spend money to keep your staff. I think that's an interesting part of the contract.
Well, it's a big step up for him, first of all. $7 million a year was basically the number for his first contract here at Texas A&M, and they clearly want to keep him around, make him happy, and he used that leverage, I think, to negotiate a pretty complex but lucrative deal for his staff and for his assistant coaches. Kudos to the guy for trying to take care of his entire group of people who work a team so hard all the time. So again, as was well reported way back when this first came out last fall, the cost to us is at A&M is pretty high. It's $10.75 million is the base for the first year, going up to $12.25 million at the end of year 6. So it's a 6-year contract. The real details there are about incentives. Very heavy in his first contract, still heavy here. All kinds of pieces of pie to go to him, especially for SEC championship. Getting into the CFP is the big deal. And every level up the CFP playoffs process, there's money tied into his contract for that. National championship, of course, being the best with well over $1 million to going to him if he was a national championship. What I found interesting was that the national championship thing locks in, or eliminates rather, his buyout. So if he wins a national championship, the buyout's gone. And he didn't cost him anything to walk away then. He's a fully guaranteed contract like Jumbo Fisher had if he wins a national championship. So that says if you get to that level, we're going to leave you alone. you do what you want to do then, basically. So that's something a little bit interesting. Oddly, Trev Alberts still appears in there by name. If Trev, if Trev were to leave, either voluntarily or not, it cuts by 50% the buyouts for him, which I find that's just an interesting thing. I've never really seen contracts before tying a head football coach to an AD that way. And that was part of his first contract too, but now it's even more locked in here in terms not just of the relevance of this, but the fact that the buyout itself has changed significantly if Trev were to leave. So go figure. I mean, I don't know really who pushed that hard. Maybe Trev did.
Right.
Hard to say. But anyways, it's interesting. But there's a very complex set of incentives in here for him. And there's a big pool for his staff. The staff, not the coaches, but the staff.
Yeah.
And a 30% bonus in the CFP area for his assistant coaches. So he is taking care of his people. And I think that's obviously to his credit. I think it's a great thing. But of course, it means the cost of the contract is pretty darn high.
Now, because Kurt Cignetti was extended at Indiana with Mike being out here, this has reverberations across the country. This now almost becomes a template for coaches at this level, does it not?
Well, I think it's unique in the sense that there's so much incentivization in here compared to what we've done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment in time we're at right now, in this current year, he's the fifth highest paid coach by the measures you can put together here in the country. If nothing were to change, as his contract grows by $300K a year base salary, he could be the third highest paid coach in the country at the end of the contract. But it'll be rare to see nothing else change in that period of time right now. So again, it's a template. I think the template basically is an incredible focus on incentivization for success and a recognition that it's not just the head coach you got to worry about, it's the assistants and even the staff members themselves. As I read it, maybe I missed something here. It looks like to me that the bonuses for the assistant coaches are fixed and locked in. The staff, it's a pool. And so there's a pool of money put aside there. And I'm assuming some internal decision-making will go on as far as who gets what based on their role they play, their performance, that sort of thing as well. Not clear, not at all there. It's just a pool he will control directly, I think, as this goes forward.
You know, he has said in the past that if you are a coach, you want to become a coordinator. If you're a coordinator, you want to become a head coach somewhere. This is, I think, a great reward for analysts, for a lot on that staff, a lot of the behind the scenes that we probably don't talk about enough, but lead to that success. And look, you're going to have guys leaving because when you win, you're in demand throughout, and he wants you to advance. But, you know, when you can keep a staff together, that's big. Teams like to poach from winners. So it's really something to keep a group together, and he must absolutely trust that staff as well.
Well, I can understand a head coach when you got a machine that's pretty well working, well-oiled machine, doing its thing. You have obvious, defections because you said people want to go to the next highest level. They can't do it here.
Right.
I mean, when is the Kansas State? What occurred recently? That's certainly going to happen. You can't stop that. But what you can do is stop the lateral shuffling around that can go on there. And I think he wants to tell people, I care about you. I love you. I want you to be taken care of, not just me. And that's a great message to send to your team of people, not just your team of athletes, team of people, if you're a head coach. And so I think Elko is pretty sharp here doing that. Yeah. And that's not been that common. Oh, sure, you get money in there to usually a pool of money to spend on your assistants and so on. But reaching down to the staff level, I've never seen a contract that got that far down the chain there in terms of giving a coach a pool of money specifically for that group of people.
Jon, if we're going to pay, you've got to bring in money. Welcome to jersey ads in college football.
It was only a matter of time, and I think again, here's college emulating the pros again, looking at all the different ways that the professional leagues have tried to monetize all of their various assets, and certainly jersey patches, at least from an NBA perspective, have been and very well. Probably the jury's still out on football, but it's just kind of harder to see from those things, but in the basketball world. But again, here's another piece of real estate that has advertising and sponsorship revenue. And I think it's going to be an interesting one in the collegiate space because at the NBA level, where they have jersey patches in, there's 30 teams out there, so it's a finite number of these patches. There's a lot of international capability, from a league. If you've got a Giannis or a Jokic or a Doncic that are playing there that have value for an international brand. And so and all of a sudden now you're flooding the market theoretically with probably somewhere to 60 of these things that which you could probably call, top tier type programming to the marketplace. And will the advertising community be able to pay them what they're getting, at an NBA level? I mean, the average NBA spot jersey patch, I think, was about $10 million. You got the Lakers and the Golden State Warriors on the high end. That's probably 25 to 30. You got a few more probably on the low end of that. But the average, I think, comes out to be in the $10 million range. And I think in collegiate sports, I've seen some analysis that, that if you're anywhere from $500,000 to $6 million, on the low end, and some as high as, $2 million to $12 million on the high end for that. So I think it's going to be interesting. But what I do think it does is that I think you'll see two different types of sponsors, I think, coming out of this deal at the end of the day. You're going to see sponsors that are what you would consider normal or advertisings that are invested in that space. Could it be a State Farm, a Progressive Insurance, an AT&T? Those guys are going to be buying, they're going to be looking for relationships where they can kind of continue to grow their brand if that fits what they're trying to do, the customer base they're trying to reach, etc. I think the unique thing here, though, that's what I think there's going to be a subset of these sponsors that are going to be companies that you and I may not have heard of, that are not part of the mainstream world, but said donor happens to be the owner of that company, and he has made a bunch of money, and he can pay more for that ad, and who's to say that said donor doesn't want to make it a $12 million value because he can, and it's his company. And how is the CSC going to argue that's not fair market value? And there could be a lot of, AT&T may not pay that, but, fill in the blank roofing company, fill in the blank plumbing company, fill in the blank technical company that a guy may have founded and made money off of. I think that's going to create a unique way for that money to be spent at a high level in an area that's probably going to pass the smell test when it comes to the CSC, even though, again, there might be some significant, there'll be other values and assets, and I get a jersey patch, I'm going to get a suite, I'm going to get all these other wonderful things. So you can probably hide that, not hide's not the right word, but you can probably include that in a relationship like that sponsor is going to be able to put more money into his program because there's a vested interest and emotional interest to do that versus strictly from an ROI based on, traditional sports marketing as we know it today with the AT&Ts and the fast food categories, etc.
Well, John, with that idea, does this mean that is there a way to target the fan base of a particular team by a company? So if I have a product, I sell things, I do things in a particular part of the country or a particular group, and maybe LSU being the example here, which is a pretty well-known brand, but also one that's highly centralized in what place? Louisiana. If I'm a Louisiana guy, businessman there, it makes perfect sense for me to use that logo space, not just to have the addition, but also to get visibility and sell more product possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, they're going to be I'm going to call it legitimate reasons, and maybe some that are not, maybe less legitimate, I guess is maybe the right word to say it, because there's other reasons why that company wants to be involved with that particular university. But again, certainly there's regionality, if you want to do that, again, we saw that in the NBA when it first came out. If you could remember, Milwaukee, the Bucks, their first jersey patch sponsor was Harley Davidson. People go, Harley Davidson, what's up with that? Well, Harley Davidson's headquarters
right there.
Right there.
Milwaukee. Then all of a sudden they get Giannis. All right. All of a sudden, Giannis, now they have an international, deal. That was probably $2 to $3 million for Milwaukee back then. But now with Giannis and in his international flavor, they can probably get 7, 8, or 9 from Motorola because they're a more global company. So you're going to see there's an art and science to this process too as time goes on. The interesting thing to me is that's a lot of inventory coming into the marketplace. Again, if you're if you're an NBA team, there's 30 of those, in this particular place, and that's for just NBA. Now, this is football, basketball, baseball, could be all the different things. Could a school divvy them up, do different things along those lines? If you're Blue Cross Blue Shield and you have all the A&M system business, does it make sense to have a Blue Cross Blue Shield logo? Probably. You could certainly make an argument for that. But would they pay a premium for that relationship? Maybe not. Or if all of a sudden the head of Blue Cross Blue Shield is it could be an Aggie alum, then maybe they do push for that further. I remember when John Whitaker was at, or Ed Whitaker was at AT&T, he decided to deal with Texas Tech because that's where he went to school. So Texas Tech's football stadium was AT&T Stadium, not because it made the greatest sense in the world, and maybe it did, but Whitaker had a relationship there. So I do think you're going to see some brands that would not jump out at you in a traditional marketing sense that you're going to see commercials on during a football game. But I do think, again, this is another opportunity at the collegiate level for a donor who has some significant opportunities owning a company could maybe pay a higher premium and that would be money that could slip by the CSC that's going to be reinvested more in players and other assets at the to get to that 20.5 and then some above the NIL threshold.
It's funny. I had not thought about that a company that you may not know, but you always talk about the big money boosters. There's that. The other thing I think, John, is with these programs that it's not just that's not just a Louisiana school, right? LSU. They're going to be on ESPN, ABC, right? And I'm almost thinking how they track in NASCAR. Can you track how many times that jersey ad is going to be seen? And I think, again, it's not just in the state. For a lot of the programs that you talked about, and there's a specific number before there's a drop-off, there is national exposure. So it could be a local booster, grad, alum, but it really is national. You almost balance that, don't you?
Yeah. So I think, again, the athletic departments who are kind of looking at that and trying to get how do we maximize value in this situation before they just settle a deal with potentially someone, they're going to put these out to bid, but there will be people who want to buy this relationship and market themselves because of their affiliation with the school. And there'll be others, again, it makes good business sense. Texas is a growing state. Again, I think the greatest jersey patch of all time, for in terms of a fit is your old Orlando Magic, with
Disney.
With Disney. I mean, it's tourism, sports tourism. I think that's been one of the jersey patches that is most of the NBAs, the original one, are long gone, somewhere in the year 3 and 4 of the clients. Yeah. Disney's still one of the ones there because it makes perfect sense for them. It's a good fit for them.
And plus, Mr. DeVos already put Amway on the arena. It's now Kia, but he put Amway on the arena, so he had it all there.
Here's a question for you, Andrew.
Yeah.
We're talking about visible logos on jerseys, okay?
Yeah.
But how about something else? Let's look at a bigger person here. Andrew Monaco is the voice of Kyle Field.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see him during a game, but you hear him.
Yeah.
Can I imagine an audio badge that you could project out there? Maybe a jingle in the background.
Monaco is brought to you by Your Space Here.
Exactly. Would that work?
I'm considering it.
It's all about the money, guys.
That's exactly right. There's going to be some money changing hands. I looked up Coach Tang at Kansas State. And when you go to kstatesports.com and look him up, you tossed an air ball, is what it says.
Wow.
Yeah, fired. I don't think it was a contentious press conference, but the school did not like what Coach said about his players and how it reflected on the program. They're going with cause now, which will have some ramifications. I'm just going to throw this blanket one out there. This might get ugly.
Well, I don't think it will. I mean, it's clear what's happening here, guys. A writer in USA Today made a very nice article about this thing, talking about this could be, if it's not reduced, the largest buyout ever for a men's basketball coach in the history of the country. Okay, $18.7 million is what I'm seeing as a number here. And of course, they say we're going to fire you for cause. Why? Save money. And they just hired a new head coach, haven't they? From guess where?
Yep.
And I'm sure in hiring him, he asked for money to help get things done. Money for staff, assistant coaches, but also money for what? NIL, probably. Where do you get the money? Kansas State's not a wealthy school like some. And so therein lies the challenge. I could see people in a small back room scratching their head saying, how do we get the money to pay this guy? Oh, I know what we can do. We can fire our men's basketball coach. But how do we do that without spending all that money on him? Well, we could do it for cause. He comes out at a press conference and he makes some derogatory statements about his team following a very difficult loss to a team arguably a team they could have beat. Okay, well, how many coaches have done that? Is my point. How many have done that? I got yelled at as a high school player. Okay, telling I was rotten. That's what the coach told me. All right, told the team that when we lost the game. When we lost all the games, sir. So my point is, this is a pretty flimsy for cause, in my opinion, given the history of comments made by coaches following a major loss. So will this stick? Probably not, but it allows a negotiation. Maybe Tang wants to get done and go on and coach somewhere else real quick. Maybe it's worth it to him to take a smaller buyout and let that happen. Who knows? But almost certainly this for cause was invented because they want to save all the money they can to do what with it? Put it into the sport that they think matters more, which is going to be college football, not college basketball.
Yeah. The reason why I said it might get ugly, because if there is on each side, you could bring out, it's almost like negotiating an arbitration where the team that still wants to sign you in baseball is going to tell you everything negative so they don't have to give you money. And you walk out of arbitration thinking, I must be the worst player, to keep it down. But in fairness, it reflects poorly on the university along like him saying that about his players. And then you see the headline, like I get that. But Dr. Loftin, when you spin it that way, it still doesn't look good for the university. And then to your point, what me and John were talking about before was, if he wants to still coach, he doesn't want that for cause on there because that puts him on the sideline for a while.
It really does. And I don't know, I don't know people's minds here, but it is pretty transparent to most people looking at this. You're hiring a new football coach and you're firing a modestly successful basketball coach who's got a pretty good size buyout. And it's not hard to figure out, to make that equation work, you need to find some money somewhere. Well, we got a $19 million buyout over here. I'll try to cut that down a little bit. That'll free up some money. So I think that's a pretty hard thing to ignore. But I would say, again, how many of us who played sports have been yelled at by a coach and told you're no good? And that's what Tang basically did.
Brooks won a gold medal in Lake Placid by doing that on the run-up. It just loves the movie Miracle.
I can just see a trial when you bring up all these examples of people saying exactly the same thing who didn't get fired for cause. Okay, it's going to be a little tough one for a jury to decide on.
Maybe I should have changed what I said. This isn't going to be ugly. This might be fascinating, as it turns out that way. I want to jump back. John, this might be the first time ever on our Follow the Money podcast that I am going to use the phrase Hoopapalooza. But that's exactly what the Big 12 wants to do with its basketball tournament, doesn't it? Making not the tournament, not just a sporting event, but a bigger event.
Yeah, to put this in context too, this is Big 12 is looking to exploit a lot of different ways to create certainly revenue opportunities and probably more important exposure for some of their marquee events, their championship game, the WWE belt, the different things they do. A lot of that is driven by their commissioner, Brett Yormark, who comes from a very professional background. I mean, he's never spent time in college athletics. He's bringing the very pro model where they basically sell anything that moves. They'll sell preseason, postseason, whatever it is, we can put a sponsor on it, we're in. And in this particular interesting, what caught me interesting as that is two things. Was they're bringing in, DJ Khalid out there to kind of do a party. And if you've ever been to the Big 12 basketball tournament, Kansas City Power and Light, it's a cool place. I mean, the stadium is right there. That's a really good setup for a basketball tournament. So they're now trying to create more environment around it, sponsored by Venmo. Again, they brought them in. Venmo is their official partner, how they pay their players through their NIL money. So they're tying all this in together, which I give Yormark a lot of credit to continue to raise the the brand awareness of what they're doing. The other interesting thing, I don't know if I shared you farther down, they're going to play on that glass floor.
Yes.
If you
Yes.
saw that, and it's not glass, it's kind of but it looks like glass. And what it really is a giant TV screen. And so while they're playing, they're going to be able to put a lot more messaging and other things in there that are going to, again, all on the parts of making revenue for that process. They've also become a partner with that tournament in Las Vegas, the Players Tournament, where they're now an equity interest in that, where they're going to make sure that, I don't know, 9 of their teams are going to play in it. So they're going to get more money from that, assuming that those guys can pay their bills. So these are different types of things that again, that the Big 12's doing that I don't think the Big 10 and the SEC would probably ever get to in that point. But again, here's the Big 12 trying to say, we're different, we're unique, we're going to be doing some things that I think others will probably, it reminds me of the old ABA and the NBA. How the ABA was always very on the creative front. They had to do different things because, again, it was just a different time and era. And these guys kind of have an ABA, a sense to their marketing, things that they're doing. So
let me add this, guys. I see another piece of this too. I think what you're saying is exactly right, guys. But having been a veteran of some of these tournaments, it gets a little old after a while. You're going to a lot of games, okay? And not games you really care a lot about because they're not your team out there on the floor. How do you keep audience interest? Part of it's going to be game playing on the actual floor by the audience. Think about that. They're going to have it set up so you can actually do things collectively as an audience. And you got this big capstone thing here at the end with a very name brand entertainer. I can see this also as a way to keep people happy, encourage them to come in spite of what could be a boring several days while you go through all these different games here. That'll always mean a lot to you.
If your school gets knocked out early, you usually leave. But now that you've made it an event, and the footprint isn't Kansas City, the footprint is the Big 12.
Yeah.
Now I do come here. Like the SEC tournaments in Nashville, it's a blast. They shut down Broadway. That's more of the city and then what they do. So to me, it's like, they make it this event. But you guys know if Kentucky gets knocked out early, that's a huge Big Blue Nation's not sticking around.
Yeah.
Now they might, right? Because there's a reason with all of these things to stick around, not just their team, but these other events.
They spend the money to travel, hotel, all that kind of stuff. And you got to book rooms because you may not be there the entire time. Maybe you're not, but it's a reason, one more reason, not the only reason, one more reason I will stay here till the end of the tournament because I know there's not only these things going on I can play with and have fun with, but also at the end there's a capstone event I'll enjoy going to.
No, it's part of that entertainment experience, and it's free, and there's going to be VIP sections. But if you have a Venmo credit card, you're going to get in free. They're doing things that are all part and parcel of to help create more value for their sponsors through this process and creates kind of an activation and experiential experiences. So I give them a lot of credit for that. I mean, it's again to your point, if your team's not playing, why stay around? But if there's a cool party like atmosphere, you might stick around for longer than that.
Exactly.
I applaud them what they're doing for that stuff.
I do too. John, I'm going to stay with you that we're so used to the 12-team college football playoff. We might have to get used to 24. And if it is 24, once again, there are the ramifications of this is what the Big Ten wants, possibly no conference championship game any longer, but more teams getting in. It's interesting what the Big Ten is putting out there and would like to see the college football playoff become.
Yeah, there was an interesting report. I think Pete Thamel did it for ESPN, got it out this past week. He got access to the document that they had been sharing and talking about, and we've heard about it. But we didn't have a whole lot of detail attached to it. And so I think one of the things that was interesting to me about that is it's trying to create more inclusion, get a greater number of teams in there. If there's 24 teams, then they eliminate the automatic qualifier process. The only automatic qualifier would be the one G6 school that would get in there. They'd have to find a room for that. But hopefully a G6 team would be in that top 24 in some fashion or form anyways, ideally. So talk about that. They've addressed the situation about, trying to get at least everybody playing a home game on campus. Some might be 2 through the first couple of rounds there. They talk about compressing the process of the season so the teams continue to play versus where you don't have a 40-day layoff or 60-day layoff, which again, it's very hard to come out and be as sharp as you were when not playing, a game over that period of time. And we've seen those teams going like 1-9, or Indiana was the only team that won, having faced that over the last 2 years. Still small sample size, but again, certainly you can to make corollary points on that. And then I think by opening up that game, it creates more inventory, which all of a sudden then creates greater value for your television partners.
Right.
And so I think that's all part of it. The one casualty on it is you lose the conference championship. But again, I think what the model would work, or the economics would work, is if you have to lose that championship game, theoretically, if you're the Big Ten or SEC, you're going to make it up in more playoff games, because you'll have more of your schools in those matchups, which will create more revenue. And hopefully you're going to make more money from a TV partner in that mix too. I mean, that would be again, when you talk about what is the NFL, NBA, and NFL done, they've all increased the playoffs, and that's where the lion's share of these media dollars come into, because those CFP playoff games, 8 of them made the top 100 most watched list this past year in 2025. And if now you've got 16 of those, that's going to probably in that mix. And here you are, button heads with the NFL again. So it's following the money. To me, that makes a lot of sense. And again, I put my TV hat on and I said, I would love to be in an opportunity to get access to more of those games across more platforms.
Yeah.
It appears, John, that the Big Ten is backing off of their original proposal somewhat, looking at a tiered approach, 16 games now, going to 24 over time. Do we see also an evolution of their guaranteed spots? Because part of the issue you said is, without a championship, how do you really get the most teams in there? And is that going to be a way to justify the fact that I have more guaranteed spots than I would have had in a model which contains, guarantees for the conference champion, but not necessarily others from the conference?
Yeah, I didn't see the number, but they did a scenario. If they had used this year's example as, I think there were 9 SEC schools that made it or something like that. I mean, the SEC would have been well represented through that process. So I think what they're saying is, by opening it to that number of people, the people who deserve it are going to get in. You're not going to sit there and say, oh, poor Texas and Vanderbilt didn't get in. They will get in this particular scenario. It also still creates value in the regular season, because now you can lose 3 games and still make it in. So if you want to schedule Ohio State as a season opener versus, Toledo, you can do that and not necessarily be penalized if you lose that particular game. So again, to me, it's felt right. And then by doing it over time, they said, look, we're going to go from 12 to go to 16 for a couple of years, and this 24 wouldn't start till like 28 or 29. And then that gives you 2 or 3 years to build up the value for the next round of the CFP TV negotiations, which should have a lot more people interested in that process. The Netflixes of the world right now, you don't have any really streaming entities in the mix like you do in the NFL. And this opens up a whole nother, avenue of dollars that are going to be coming in. And again, if those dollars help you pay for your Olympic sports, I would think there would be a lot of people who would be in favor of that as time goes on.
And how do you see that playing out in the eyes of a Group of X team? I mean, here you are kind of on the outside looking in. How do I try to get my team or my group of into the mix as well? Is that going to be a different role now? I mean, again, there was issues about guaranteed spots, things like that were never resolved.
They guarantee one for the Group of 6 champions. So whoever that is, they get in. Now, could a couple of others get in there? Theoretically, maybe if somebody runs the table and is the 16th in the country, there probably will be opportunities like that. So I think, again, by having 24 teams in, the opportunity for inclusion is much greater than it is under 12-team format. Again, like anything else, I mean, there are going to be stuff the unintended consequences that are other podcasts that we would talk about at some point. But, until we see it happen, I mean, I think, again, they did a pretty good job laying out all the issues. And the only thing that they didn't really have was an answer for was, again, the losing the championship game. But theoretically, if the championship game was all about money in the first place, then you've got an opportunity there. Now, I do think, again, if you're a conference, not how do you claim who your conference champion is at the end of the day? And because that's still somebody that not everybody's going to win the national championship, and people still like to put up on their football stadiums, Iowa's conference championship in next year. So that's probably got to be sorted out. But if you're playing 9 and maybe by that time you go to 10 conference games, who knows? That you should have a pretty way to kind of determine who your conference championship is. I
Yeah.
would.
I would think it would also be a way to make it easier for the SEC has been at 8 to go to the 9 conference games if there's a chance of more teams because of strength of schedule
Yeah.
and the impressive wins. Yeah, you make a great point. It might be more palatable
Yeah.
to the SEC, which has
Yeah.
resisted.
Yeah.
Dr. Loftin, I'm going to stay in the Big Ten. The Ohio State president has said that he does not think that this current state of NIL is sustainable for the next 3 years. We've all heard people say things like that. He's really one of the first to say this is something that could be a disaster sooner rather than later.
Well, it's interesting how he said it, and I've looked over the comments more than once now, trying to really perceive the nuances in there. First of all, this is Ted Carter. He's a former vice admiral, retired vice admiral, a Navy officer of some seniority, who was hired by Ohio State to be their president. They've gone through some interesting times, and my old, I wouldn't call him exactly a friend, my old acquaintance, Gordon Gee, was there twice, actually, and had major things to do with their athletic programs there. But I'm kind of quoting him. This is kind of a quasi quotation here. What he said. He said, "We moved from third parties to interior." Think about that a minute. So the NIL space has gone from these collectives and individuals and companies pouring money in to individual players to now more an interior decision-making process. For example, here I cannot any longer designate NIL money to a particular player as a person who is doing this individually. If I were a company and there were value added by the player being named, then I can do that way. So it's a different kind of world than we once started with here 3-4 years ago after the 2021 decision by Judge Wilkin. So he said that. And he said that he's Ohio State now, is one of 5 schools, he says, in the country that can play on a level field with NIL. So he's kind of bragging away. We got the money, no matter what happens, to be competitive. And that may well be true. They certainly are a big school with lots of graduates who've done pretty well. So I can understand that being a possibility here. But he does add the caveat. He says, NIL in football. And he goes on to talk about being worried about how do you deal with the other sports. If I want OSU to have the best women's basketball team, how do I make that work financially now with the value of the individual players coming into the mix here? Or name other sports you might have besides that, especially sports that are either in the middle of the pack, like baseball and women's basketball, or even some of the non-revenue sports, as Nebraska has with volleyball and Norman, Oklahoma has with softball. So I think he's definitely looking at a problem here of how much money is there going to be, especially when you get beyond football. And I'd appreciate your all's thoughts about that too, is how do you try to make this work when there almost seems to be no limit? There's a cap on the revenue sharing, yes, but there's not a cap on NIL. And should there be? Will there be? I don't know.
I don't know how you cap it. I mean, that's
Not sure either.
That's the CSC's job. There's so many ways to circumvent it. And we've talked about a couple here, and there are other people staying up late at night trying to figure this out too. And again, where there's a will, there's a way. So I don't know how you cap it. So until again, you hopefully that you try to play by the rules, but someone's always going to be trying to to push the limits. So and I don't under the current configuration, I don't see how you can ever cap it.
And that's where I think he was getting at, John.
Yeah.
He doesn't see any way this can be sustained because of, first of all, football being a requirement. And how do you now go beyond football to support other sports at a number that makes sense for a giant school like Ohio State or a Texas A&M or another really big school like Florida, for example, who wants to have dominance in many areas here. The past has been examples of individuals who had money and came in and said, we're going to dominate a particular non-revenue sport. The guy that runs the Love Truck Stops came in and said, we're going to do this for softball at the University of Oklahoma. Okay, they did that. Now, arguably, Texas Tech has come along and won up them on that a little bit. But my point to you simply is that they were one person coming in and saying, I'm going to dump money into one sport that nobody else seems to care about. Well, after a while, other people care about that. And that becomes a competitive issue as well. So that's what I think this guy was trying to say. This has no real growth boundaries here. If we begin to look across the entire world of college sports, this could get really, really difficult and very nasty.
Well, I didn't see the article or the quote, but when he said about football, is he saying what reading between the lines is we need to move football into its own stratosphere, and then everything else goes.
He didn't say that, but the
back to
implication is
normal?
how do you deal with? You got to deal with football. He's saying you can't not deal with football. Okay, I got that. We all agree with that one probably. But how do you then allow other money to be available for those sports? We see it next door here. I mean, come on, guys. How much money has women's basketball gotten here at Texas A&M compared to a place like South Carolina or LSU, where they have a uniquely, uniquely visible coach and a lot of success to build on top of here? It becomes a really hard equation there. And I haven't seen a lot of NIL money pouring into other than football and to some extent men's basketball at our own home university right here. I don't live elsewhere. I don't know all the rules and regs and what's going on there, but I think it's really hard unless you have a singular individual coming along and saying, I'm going to take care of this.
Yeah, and interesting, you bring up those two programs at those two schools. Think about how South Carolina and LSU, where the women's programs are gangbusters and their men's programs are suffering. They're not doing well, and no one's showing up for those men's games. They've got to deal with that internally as well. Now, do you go out and pay money for a roster? But what if that roster doesn't pay off? And that's the thing. For Ted Carter to come out and say this, we keep talking about unintended consequences, right? What's going to happen in this Wild West world? Now we're starting to see the consequences. And I don't think it's a matter of putting the lid and pushing everybody down, but can we at least corral some of this and give us some kind of guideposts? I'm with John. I don't know. And to your point, you said a great point, Dr. Loftin. Schools want to dominate. They don't want to just win any longer. And they will ply the school with money if it gives them a chance to dominate. To me, it's something that is a part of what's going on. And I think there is older coaches who have said, I'm glad I'm on the back end of my career because I don't want to deal with all of this. I think there's also been NIL before NIL, so I'm not kidding myself. I was going to make the comment about it looks like paper bags of money are going to come back again in the sports world. But it was nice for Ted Carter to kind of let everybody know that, yeah, and for him to say, and for an Ohio State president to say, this is not sustainable. How about those other presidents at other schools who have said it, but just haven't had the kind of stage to say it like he has?
Yeah, a few days ago, guys, I was sitting in my nice club seats at softball and watching a $1 million softball pitcher from Texas Tech, watching her do her thing. So in the first inning of that game, the first two pitches thrown by arguably the best pitcher possibly at A&M right now were home runs, single home runs by the first two batters, okay? Then things shut down, and nothing happened the rest of that. But then when it was time for them to pitch and us to bat, this middle pitcher gets up there, and she throws some extraordinary stuff. But a young lady named Wark got up there and hit a 2-run home run off of her. And so I turned to a guy who was right next to me here, who is, I won't mention his name, he's on the show before. He's an NIL guy. I said to him, what's a batter worth who gets a home run off a $1 million pitcher? And that begins to illustrate the problem you get into here. When you begin to try to buy, how many you got to buy more than one. You can't just arguably Tech has a couple of pitchers that one maybe $500,000 worth, and $1 million pitcher that came over from Stanford. They got two of them at least. But it's not just a one-sided game, is it? You got hitters too. And
no, you can't win. You can't win a 0-0 game. You got to score.
Exactly. And so I just wonder again, as you said, John. I mean, what are the posts here? You don't need a cap, maybe, but you need some degree of constraint that says, this is as far as you can go here. Because, I mean, there's so much money out there, guys, and it's mostly going one place right now. But there's some of these exceptions to it, and we'll have to see how it plays out here. I just don't know how you would regulate something like that exactly, given the court decisions made to date. You could presumably change laws and make laws and things like that, because these were judges ruling within the specific framework of rules and laws. Yeah. They were primarily doing so from an antitrust viewpoint. Yeah. And those laws might be very difficult to tinker with going forward, given how much they affect in a national scope.
Maybe they need better lawyers.
We have no lack of lawyers, my friend. We have no lack of lawyers.
that will never run out. That's for sure. That's for sure. Final thought. I can't wait for the first Sacramento State Hornet Central Michigan Chippewa game in the MAC. Yeah, I'm going to be in Mount Pleasant, Michigan for that one. I hope the Chippewas get the home game.
Curious marriage.
From a guy who had a package of games in the MAC, it's wonderful. I just don't know how Sacramento in the state of California is in the Mid-Atlantic Conference.
It is a very weird thing. I mean, the MAC is sort of a middle of America kind of thing, okay? They're out there. And the only thing I can see is there may be some financial incentive to a somewhat mediocre program moving from the West Coast into the mix of schools in the middle of the country here that we call the MAC. My experience with the MAC has been I'll tell you a quick story here. I went to a football game in Shreveport that Texas A&M played versus a school from that side of the border. In this case, it was La Tech. And the referees were from the MAC.
The MAC.
It is the longest football game I have ever endured in my entire life, gentlemen. It started at 9:00 at night with a kickoff. I walked out of the stadium at 2 a.m. Okay? It was a long night for Bowen Loftin, okay?
Yeah.
And the game was won by my home team.
Back to the,
barely.
To the hurricane line. I thought I saw you going back to there once or twice, if I recall.
But I could not abide those MAC officials kept calling all these weird calls. Yeah. It kept the game going longer and longer. And my last view was watching the La Tech coach facing an empty half of the stadium because all his fans had gone, saying, "Where have you gone? Where have you gone?" It was the most hilarious thing I've ever seen in my life. And the Aggies fans were still full at 2 a.m.
About right. It's about right. We're going to talk about that more later. I know Sacramento State wanted desperately to get into the new PAC conference or the Midwest. Yeah. North Dakota State's going into the Mountain West Conference, again, for football. I guess they just want this land. And to move up to that is another one, but maybe that is another topic for another time. Thank you for your time. Dr. Loftin, Jon Heidtke, Bowen, thank you. Nick Savage is our producer. Nick, thank you very much. And I see you there, Kay Nagley. Just want to say hello to you as well. I'm Andrew Monaco. Thank you for joining us on this edition. Follow the money. So long, everybody.